How's it going, guys? Today, oh my, the frames are dropping. And welcome back to Shower Thoughts, where I share with you my own personal experiences and answer any questions that you guys might have down in the comments. Today, we're going to be talking about what it means to be articulate. And it's got to start with a little story back in middle school. In about the 4th or 5th grade, I had an experience with a teacher. We'll call him Mr. Manny. Mr. Manny was freaking awesome. He was probably the best teacher ever, and one of the few teachers in my growing up years that actually made an impact on me. There's others that have made an impact on me in maybe a more negative way, but that is probably for just another video, another time, another conversation that I have had with myself way too much. Anyway, Mr. Manny was like the coolest teacher ever, okay? He wasn't like other teachers. He was obsessed with Star Wars and absolutely loved what he did, and everybody loved him as well. He was the kind of teacher that really brought life experience, life advice, and just good general vibes to everything. And he was a social studies teacher. So most of his classes just surrounded around learning world history, and well, that's really about all I understood of social studies growing up. I don't think technically that's what it's supposed to be. I think world history is supposed to be its own subject, but I've never had a social studies be anything other than just history. So essentially, there was one time, well, there was a couple times where I had some really defining moments with this teacher, but there was one time in particular where I was caught cheating. All right, we were in the computer lab, and I decided that I was going to copy and paste an entire website's worth of information and paste it as my paper that we were supposed to be writing. The funny thing about that is Mr. Manny came up to me and he's like, "Hey, why are you playing cool math games, kid?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm done. I'm done with my paper, Mr. Manny. You see that? Done." And he's like, "Well, let me take a look at that paper." And I go, "Okay, you got it, G." And so he saw my paper. He saw very clearly that a 5th grader or 4th grader, I can't remember exactly what grade I was in, did not write that. It was a full-blown, college professor that clearly wrote that. And so he's looking at it. I'm starting to sweat a little bit because I think, oh man, I'm going to get in trouble. And I did. But the thing is, he taught me a very valuable lesson that day. He sat down with me, and some teachers would have just pulled me out in the hall, yelled at me, and then, put me in detention, which is kind of what I was expecting. But this is one of my first experiences with him really having what I would call the defining moments that he had with a lot of his students. And so he pulled me aside and he goes, "Do you know what this word means?" I go, "No." "And do you know what this word means?" I go, No, I don't know what that means." He's like, "You clearly did not write this if you have no clue what these words are." And I go, yeah, that makes sense. I'm sorry." He's like, "Yeah, it taught me a valuable lesson that my words were much more important than the words of other people, that I have my own way of speaking, and that right now as a 4th or 5th grader, I don't need to have some sort of perfect way of saying things. The language has to be my own, regardless if it's not as good as what some random guy on a website could type. Somebody who graduated college or is a college professor. I can't do the same as him if I don't learn how to write on my own. And so it was a valuable lesson. He really taught me that cheating was not a good thing, and that cool math games was not worth cheating over. But he also just taught me, hey, you have to have your own voice when doing things like this for a lot of reasons, but mostly so that you can learn and grow in a much better and more intuitive way. And so I thought to myself, wow, this is pretty awesome. Maybe about a week or two later, with that still fresh in my mind, he had kind of taken some time to get the class together and talk about what it means to be articulate. And this is where kind of the crux of it all goes. I had this idea fresh in my mind. Let me have my own words, my own voice. He talked about, there's several people who have very basic vocabulary, which is fine. We're all pretty still young at this point. But he says, if you want to be interesting, you want people to actually care about what you're saying. And this was kind of in response to the amount of, I would say, boring, uncreative, or just papers that need a little more work for the writing level that was expected of us at the time, which many of us were just getting used to the internet and computers and stuff like that, and cool math games was like the TikTok of my time, of my generation, if you say. That's what I would say. But so we're just like not paying attention the way we should. So he's talking about this is like for us. Our education is for us. Being articulate makes you more interesting. It allows you to talk about more topics. Being able to increase the value of your words comes from increasing exactly just that, your vocabulary. Being articulate means that you have an increased vocabulary that is intelligent and meaningful. And so he taught another valuable lesson just a few weeks later with that idea fresh in my mind, that if I want to sound like a college professor, I got to learn more words that college professors learn. If I want to be able to talk to important or successful people, I got to be able to know the same words that important and successful people have. And so over the years, I have learned, maybe not quite as much as I would say that I would have wanted at the time, but I was pretty basic in my language and pretty immature, not like in an inappropriate way, but like just not in a very grown up way. And so I learned a lot. And I had the goal to increase my vocabulary over the years. And it's gotten, a lot better. Safe to say that it really has changed the way that I think and feel. I'm no Nostradamus. I'm not some, crazy philosopher or anything. I'm not a Shakespeare, but I feel like I at least have a pretty good idea as to my life experience, and it feels more valuable. My life experience feels more valuable being able to express some of life's most important experiences. And little bit about me, I spend a decent amount of time creating little lesson plans. I teach youth in my church. I volunteer to do that a couple times a month, basically. Not every Sunday, but a good portion of Sundays throughout the month. And I try to teach life lessons to these kids. They're all in various situations that could be pretty tough. A lot of different temptations in the world, a lot of different things that can really waste your time and waste your overall value. And so I try to bring up the Bible and stuff and get them interested in doing kind of the same thing, and maybe from a bit more religious perspective, obviously. But there's things to be learned when you read, and there's things to be taught when you really listen and hear other people speak. That's why I constantly listen to podcasts of various different topics. Listen to religious podcasts. I listen to business podcasts and even just entertaining podcasts. But a lot of times people just have thoughts, ideas, opinions that I can kind of extrapolate all the different pieces of value that they bring, and they give me a lot of motivation, things to think about, etc. Plus, I just have a lot of extra time at my job to listen to things like that when I get bored of music, but it just depends on if I gotta stay really focused or not. my current task. But yeah, being articulate mostly is just it gives you a certain sense of value, not only for yourself, but it's a perceived value for others around you. Others around you can talk about more complex things if your vocabulary is a bit more complex. If you allow yourself to be subjected to too much filler in your sentences, it can be really difficult to sound intelligent, even though you might be very intelligent. But if every few words you say a nasty swear, sure, you might be able to still have a similar conversation, but that can really detract from your overall ideas, because you're constantly just trying to fill the gaps. That's the same thing with one of my favorite teachers. He was a speech teacher. He was this old fart that loved Diet Coke, and every time that we gave a speech in the class, which, class of 30 kids, and then you get him opening up a new Diet Coke every speech. So he drank like 30 a day. That guy probably has the worst diabetes of all time, and it's been so long now, I don't know if he's doing okay. I do worry about that a little bit, because that man was really, really funny and a really good guy, but dang, that Diet Coke was probably what has or will be the end of him at one point. Anyway, he would always talk about, getting rid of the the little fillers and stuff, and well, it really does help you sound more intelligent. Stop saying like so much, and maybe you'll actually be able to come up with some thoughts. The thing is, a lot of people don't like silence, but the reality is being able to sit for a second after marinating on something that you're talking about, thinking about, etc., really does make a difference in your problem solving, as well as just your overall presentation on something. You can stop for a moment. And when you do, you can collect your thoughts. It has a different feel. And some people can feel quite uncomfortable, especially if they're standing in front of an audience or something like that. And they're like, oh man, I can't possibly just be silent. And that's one of the things that's really not true. You can take a moment. You can have some cadence. You don't have to talk a million miles an hour. In fact, talking with a particular cadence, as I said a little bit earlier, that helps. That helps with being able to sound more articulate and have a particular voice that other people maybe don't have. Oh, geez, look at that. But yeah, it's not just about sounding smart. It's about feeling the meaning behind your words and actually proving to yourself as well as other people that you know what you're talking about, that your words have value. And that is important. Education is important. I feel like I got the short end of the stick in so many ways. I could rant on for quite a while. I could probably do a good 30 minutes talking about how terrible my general education was. And it's one of the reasons why I've been afraid / not interested to go to college at all. It's because of how useless so many teachers were. And that's really sad to say, but honestly, public schools, even in my generation, did not do nearly good enough to prepare me for the true future of adulthood. You taught me what it feels like to be yelled at. You taught me what it feels like to get bad grades and not participate in the rewards of that the teachers have for having good grades, etc. You could the being ostracized a little bit for having some reading disabilities and ADHD and things like that. Like, sure, you could tell me that those things were toughening experiences, but those life lessons you're going to learn anyway. I learned a lot more social skills by going out and knocking on people's doors and asking them if they want to learn more about Jesus. And I learned a lot more doing that than I ever did going to public school. They just want you to shut up, do the written tests that the state came up with for government funding. I don't know. And then also like in college, no, in preparation for college, was it the ACT? Yeah. Got like a 18 or something on the ACT. And after I got my test, everybody was 25 or 30 that I knew personally. They were like, oh yeah, look at this. I can get into the best colleges ever. And then I was like, well, what about this? What about this 18? They're like, did you even study? I'm like, what do you mean? We had 2 classes that were dedicated in my high school to like help prep us for the ACT. The one class was a science class, and in that science class, we watched Planet Earth, the entire documentary. And that was cool, but that did not help me in the least in preparation for the ACT. And then in addition to that, I found out afterwards that all these kids that got 30s and they studied. I didn't know you could study for the ACT. I didn't know where you could go to do that kind of thing. And so I only learned afterwards that I could have studied. And I also learned that I could take it again. I just had to pay for it. And at that point, I was really frustrated. So I was like, I don't really want to do that. They hate me. And I don't know. The education system's a little botched, and I don't know how to fix it. But yeah, articulateness. I did learn some very valuable lessons from some very awesome people. And I just want to kind of hear your experiences. If you want to know more about my education, my high school education, feel free to, I don't know, leave a comment or something. I'm curious what you guys are thinking, what you guys have experienced. There's a lot of things that my wife will tell me. It's like, you didn't have that experience in high school? I'm like, no. Some people will be surprised that I thought that pools were a myth or like a thing that was, never heard of a swim team till after high school. Well, that was weird. I've never seen that before. I've actually never made it this far before, and this is making me very terrified of losing my progress. So I think I'm gonna just sit my little pot down here. And that's probably too much ranty. I don't know how much of this I'm actually going to cut out, but yeah, being able to express yourself properly requires a little more time and effort into understanding different words, different meanings. And I feel like even a little bit recently, I've probably fallen out of being a little more articulate the way that I would have hoped. But it makes you more interesting. It makes you more, you can talk with more people, because the more articulate you are, the more intelligent people you can communicate with. And you can always communicate with people who are less intelligent or less articulate. And that's basically the overall meaning behind that. So, yeah. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you all coming back to Shower Thoughts. And I don't know how often I'm going to do this, but if I have a thought, I'm gonna do this, and maybe one day I'll actually beat this game because I'm calm instead of frustrated. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.